would like to welcome all of you tonight, the candidates, the audience, and those viewing at a later time, to this forum sponsored by the League of Women Voters Rochester. We'd also like to thank our generous partners of tonight's forum, the Rochester Post-Bulletin, the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce, the Rochester Public Library, and RCTC for their help. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan volunteer organization organized at the local, state, and national level to encourage citizens to participate in government while we as a league do study and take stands on issues. We never endorse or support political parties or candidates. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters Rochester or any partner or sponsor of this forum. And the sponsorship of the forum is not an endorsement of any candidate. It is our purpose in sponsoring this forum to provide you with an opportunity to hear candidates discuss face-to-face issues that are important to you. Tonight's questions have come from the League of Women Voters Rochester, the Post-Bulletin, the Chamber of Commerce, and members of our audience. As there is never enough time to cover all of the issues in a limited time and setting such as this, please feel free to contact the candidates' campaign headquarters directly if your questions are not addressed tonight. We'd like to thank all candidates for running for office, for offering to serve their community, and for the enormous time, dedication, and commitment that running and serving demand. We encourage our members as individuals as we encourage each of you to get involved in your community and the political party of your choice. All candidates who filed for office were invited to this forum. At least 2 candidates must be present for us to hold the forum. So, I want to introduce the people who will be participating. The timekeeper tonight is a volunteer from the League of Women Voters, Rebecca Larson. Thank you very much. Asking questions for the Post-Bulletin is Heather Carlson. And for the Chamber of Commerce, Chris Holloway. Thank you for being here. The candidates have drawn numbers to determine the order in which they will speak. And they will have a 1-minute opening statement. Following that, they will have the opportunity to answer questions with 1 minute for their answer, and they have the option 3 times during this debate to use a rebuttal card, which gives them 30 extra seconds. Carla Nelson will give the first statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you to the League of Women Voters, the Post-Bulletin, and the Chamber of Commerce for sponsoring tonight's event. And a special thank you to each one of you for being here during the presidential debates. And I'm thankful we have DVRs. My name is Carla Nelson. I'm a wife, a mother, former Rochester teacher, and a small business owner. I have lived and served in this community for nearly 30 years. The last 2 years, it's been my honor to represent this dynamic and diverse district in the Minnesota Senate. I brought common sense solutions to state government to achieve a $7 billion budget turnaround without increasing taxes. My priorities have been economic growth through making Minnesota a more job-friendly state, to stimulate job growth by keeping more dollars in the hands of Minnesotans and job creators, and making sure our youth are well educated and ready to succeed. I'm looking forward to this forum. It's number 9. I've attended them all. I promise to continue a focus-driven, issues-driven, positive campaign.
Thank you, and I'll just mention to the candidates, if you're in the middle of a sentence when that red card comes up, go ahead and finish your sentence. And now, Ken Moen.
I'm Ken Moen. I'm running for state senate. I'm a veteran. I run my own small business as a trial attorney in Rochester. I've not been a politician. I decided to become involved as a candidate because of the state shutdown last year. We elect our legislators to run our state's business. Can we not keep our doors open? I've learned as a trial attorney the value of negotiations and sticking with it to find common ground, even in the face of real diverse interests and values. Tonight, I'm going to be commenting on Senator Nelson's voting record. I don't do this in the spirit of negative campaigning. As a challenger, my obligation is to hold her responsible for her voting record. Her responsibility is to be forthright. If elected, I hold myself out as a senator who will truly look to find common ground. Senator Nelson claims not to be a partisan. Candidates can claim anything they want. The voting record would tell us the real story.
Thank you. The first question will come from the Post Bulletin and will go to Ken Moen first.
Minnesota is struggling in the wake of the economic recession. What do you think needs to be done to help create more jobs?
Well, my approach on jobs is to focus projects that are specific to actual job creation. This would contrast to what I will call trickle-down economics. We don't create jobs necessarily by just leaving more money in the pockets of the wealthy. We can do more job-specific programs by using wisely our bonding authority. We should be doing more of it. We lost the opportunity with the Civic Center. We should have had that. There are other infrastructure needs that should be bonded. There might be other specific programs that we can address as well. One thing we have to do to focus our attention on this is to adopt a structurally balanced budget. Then we know what we've got to work with, and we have to be honest with ourselves and truly fund what we propose to do. So we look for focused job creation programs, not the vague idea that somebody with a little more money in their pocket will create a job.
Thank you. Carla Nelson.
Thank you. I think this is the number one question facing us in the state of Minnesota right now. My record is one of working to make Minnesota a more job-friendly state, working to do so by making us more job-friendly in our tax climate. I sponsored bills that would reduce taxes in this state. In addition, I sponsored bills and we passed bills that streamlined regulation so jobs that are seeking to expand and come into this state can come here in a quicker manner and get through the regulatory process in a quicker manner. In addition, as a teacher and the vice chair of the Education Committee, I know very well that we must have a well-educated workforce to fill those jobs. And it starts in the early grades and continues on through college as well, college and career. I think continuing the $7 billion budget turnaround that we saw the last 2 years is exactly the medicine that Minnesota needs to continue to grow in these economic climates.
Thank you. Is there any rebuttal?
Yes, I want to address, I don't know if this is the only time I'll get it, but she's mentioned it in the opening statement and now. There hasn't been a $7 billion turnaround. If you look at the Office of Management and Budget reports, you can go online and look them up, look under forecasts. The truth is we started out with about a $5 billion deficit when the Senate majority takes over, and we end up with about a $4 billion deficit right now. There is no surplus. There hasn't been a great turnaround.
Any rebuttal, Carla Nelson? You don't need to use it right now.
Oh no, I'll address that later.
Great. And next question from the Chamber of Commerce goes to Carla Nelson first.
What two specific ideas do you have to reduce the cost of government?
Oh, I will continue working towards that. Some of the things we can do specifically were, as my government efficiency bill, focused on 4 areas using today's technology to help government run more efficiently. I will continue to expand that. The governor signed that legislation into law by executive order, projected to save $400 million in the next biennium. We need to continue to use technology and today's tools to allow government to be more effective and more efficient. We also need to look at streamlining how government interacts with businesses. Again, that is through a permitting process. I offered legislation based on the Rochester model, by the way, that would allow government, as these permits go from agency to agency to agency, requiring that government put those permits online so every agency can look at those permits at the same time to help our businesses get started quicker. We want businesses to stay here, we want them to expand here, and we want our innovators to innovate and commercialize here.
Ken Moen.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to go back to my idea of structurally balancing a budget. This would get us focused on what I think is idea number 1. We need, once we decide what that budget should be, and we decide how we're going to pay for it, we should be doing a program by program review. Certainly there are going to be cost efficiencies and overlaps that we can address. Secondly, I would also look at reducing the cost of government by looking at our tax expenditures. These are public dollars. These are deductions, loopholes, credits, and so forth that we give out for certain purposes. These need to be reviewed. I think what happens is we decide what kind of program we want to promote. We give somebody a tax credit or a deduction based along those lines. They need to be reviewed because I think there are a lot of savings that can be achieved in the cost of running a government through reducing the level of tax expenditures we've got right now.
Thank you. Are there any rebuttals on this question? If not, I'll move to the question from the League of Women Voters, and this goes first to Ken Moen. What should the legislature do to change or improve the state health care policies and programs?
Well, I'll use Tina's line. This is not an area I've been actively working in, but we are presently limiting the amount of money that we're spending on nursing and so forth that would help keep people in their homes. That ought to be reviewed. We can provide health care to those people in need better as long as they can stay at home as they possibly can. We've got a wasteful system. And we need to fully develop and implement the health insurance exchange. I think this can be a great asset to us. I was sad to see there's no Republican cooperation in setting it up. We need it set up, we need it functioning.
Thank you. Carla Nelson.
Well, certainly any health care reform should start in Rochester, Minnesota. We have the best health care in the world here. We also have more insured than nearly any other state in this state. So that is the model I'll be looking at, which is the Rochester model. Specifically, we can focus on prevention. No surprise, a teacher would say a lot of that comes through education. We also should focus on those chronic diseases that have the largest cost, and chronic disease management can certainly help there. We also need to look at transparency and cost. Transparency and cost is one of the key things that's really lacking in our medicine today. Have you asked your pharmacist how much that prescription really costs that you're picking up? I would encourage you to do that. They will have a hard time giving an answer. So transparency and cost, and also making sure that we have, again, addressed chronic conditions and prevention. And regarding the exchanges, if we're going to have exchanges, they need to be driven by Minnesota and Minnesota legislators, not the federal government.
Thank you. Seeing no rebuttals, we'll turn to the post bulletin for the next question, which will be given to Carla Nelson first.
On November 6th, voters will vote on two constitutional amendments, the marriage amendment and the voter ID amendment. If elected, would you support putting additional amendments before the voters, and if so, which ones?
You know, we have a history of constitutional amendments in this state. Probably about 200 of them have been on the ballot. Some of them have been on more than once before they've passed. Some have been on and have been abandoned. And so it is a process. I respect the process. And I will continue on these two amendments to make sure that if the voter ID amendment passes, I can guarantee you that I will work to make sure that every eligible voter has the ability to get a photo ID at government expense. I've already have legislation to do that regarding nursing homes, veterans homes, battered women's shelters, those type of things. So I'm convinced that that is something that we can do in this state and make sure no eligible voter is unable to vote. And in fact, someone who does not have photo ID in this day and age is disenfranchised in many ways already. And that could be considered something that government should do, is give them one of those photo IDs so they can fully access our society.
Ken Moen.
I would oppose any future use of this kind of procedure. This is really an end around the governor in these instances. These matters should be handled through normal legislation. The Constitution, in my opinion, is too easy to change in Minnesota. It should actually be made more difficult. All you need is a majority in the House, simple majority in the Senate, simple majority, and you go to the polls. I don't agree with that process. I think the next couple we're going to see, if the process continues, is anti-union. It'll be right to work, as a constitutional amendment. I oppose the use of the Constitution for that purpose. It'll be creating a supermajority to impose any additional taxes. Those are the two ideas that were floated around. I can guarantee you, if things don't change at the legislature, we're going to be seeing more of it, and I'm opposed to it.
Thank you. Any rebuttals?
I do have a rebuttal. Thank you. You know, I would encourage people to look at our history of voting and amendments. It's very common, and I can guarantee you that it is not an easy process. It's a very peculiar type of majority that must pass an amendment, and I support that high threshold. In other words, everyone who takes a ballot, that is counted. And if you vote yes, it's a yes vote. If you vote no, it's a no vote. But if you don't vote at all, it's a no vote at all. And that's the way we should have our Constitution. It should be hard to change the Constitution. And certainly look at the history of constitutional amendments in our state.
Anything further? Okay. Next question comes from the Chamber of Commerce and goes to Ken Moen first.
In the upcoming session, the legislature will work on tax reform. What would you propose to make Minnesota better able to attract and retain businesses?
Well, I think the history shows that Minnesota has thrived at times when we have had higher taxes than we actually have now. I don't see it as a great hurdle. As Tina Liebling pointed out, our unemployment rate in Minnesota is lower than the national average, and our unemployment rate in Rochester is even lower than that. Certainly we can do something to better our tax situation. I don't think, though, that we should be looking at just leaving more money in the pockets of the very wealthy as an excuse, as an explanation. All we offer is, well, that's going to be job creation. I think there ought to be tax reform. We ought to have tax fairness. I don't think we have it right now. Very wealthy individuals are able to pay a lot lower percentage of their actual income. Certainly we don't want to tax anybody in excess of what we need. I'll go back to my structurally balanced budget. We need to be honest with ourselves once we've decided what that is and fairly tax ourselves to pay for it.
Thank you. Carla Nelson.
Well, I do believe there's a clear difference here. Minnesota is currently 45th in the nation, with 50th being worse as far as a business-friendly state. My friends, it is business and jobs that create the revenue that Minnesota government needs. We need to do everything we can to increase our job friendliness, and that includes looking at the tax structure. I have already sponsored bills that will help Main Street businesses compete with our online retailers. Currently, our Main Street businesses pay the property taxes, and yet they're at a competitive disadvantage. In addition to that, I sponsored legislation, the Angel Investor Tax Credit, which is particularly important to this area, and it's about fairness. My opponent has attacked that, but I'm not sure that he understood what the bill does. It makes sure that the statewide program gets some of those tax incentives into this area, not just the 7-county metro area. So again, I think we need to be competitive. South Dakota, by the way, is number 2. We need to change that.
Thank you. Is there a rebuttal? Yes.
Yes, please. I want to talk about that Angel Investor Credit Program very briefly. It basically says for a qualified business, a qualified investor gets a 25% credit for any investment they make in a startup qualifying business. Deed studied the data. It indeed created some jobs, 102 jobs at a public cost of $155,000 per job. Senator Nelson's proposal last year would double that credit. Come on. Do we need to be spending $310,000 to create a job at public expense? No.
Is there another rebuttal? Carla?
Yes. Attorney Moen, that is not accurate. The fact of the matter is, my proposal took the very same amount of money that is currently in the program, and as a matter of tax fairness, made sure that our part of the state is eligible to use those tax credits. It's about fairness. I do not believe that a statewide program should have the majority, about 90% of its money, going in the 7-county metro area, especially when our part of this state is great on the high-tech, biotech. That is our strength. We need to make sure some of those tax incentives come to this district.
Thank you. The next question is from the League of Women Voters, and it goes first to Carla Nelson. What is your position on the Rochester Civic Convention Center expansion project?
Well, I have a record on this. Not only did I sponsor the bill, that means I authored the bill, I also had an opportunity to make sure that this bill was included in the bonding bill when it was in the Capital Investment Committee. And I made sure that not only did I vote for it coming out of that committee, but so did enough of my colleagues. So I have a history on that. But the question is, why would I support that? I like that project because, you know, we already have 2.7 million visitors who come to this city every year. And I like the fact that they bring their money and they spend it here. And if we can get more of those visitors to come to our state and spend their money right in our city, I think that's a good thing. However, going forward, we need to maybe do a postmortem on the Civic Center expansion and see what were the problems. Why did it not garner any support in the House? We need to see what that was, and we need to look going forward about what we can do to make sure that we continue to bring money into this city. I think finger pointing and politicizing this is perhaps at the detriment of the project.
Thank you. Ken Nolan.
Thank you. I strongly support the bonding of the expansion of the Mayo Civic Center. When I first got involved, I looked around and I didn't see much energy around it. Very quickly, though, I found the City Council got firmly behind it. The Chamber of Commerce got firmly behind it. I know that in the first session, not this last session, the one before, Senator Nelson told people that were up there lobbying her she would not support this proposal. Now there has been a turnaround. So I support it now that I didn't support it, but now I do. I take that at face value. I think that Senator Nelson just proved how ineffective she is in working with her own party. I can guarantee you that if we had a Democratic majority, we'd have that thing approved because the governor has been behind it 2 sessions in a row. We just don't have state senators who are effective in working within their own party to get this done for Rochester.
Is there a rebuttal?
I'll save it till later. Thank you.
All right. We'll move to the first question from the floor, and it goes first to Ken Moen. Do you think it is advisable to delay payments to schools and use one-time payments like the tobacco settlement money to balance the budget?
Thank you. Obviously, no. Historically, we've been working with what's called a shift. 90% of what's allocated to the education system in a calendar year and 10% follows. This last debacle, we went to 60-40. Senator Nelson will say some of it's been paid back. The shift is still about 64-36. This is unacceptable. How do you plan a budget if you're a school district with that kind of flip-flopping? We need to stabilize that and stabilize it now. I also don't agree with the use of one-time money to balance a short-term state budget. That's why I'm talking about a structurally balanced budget. We used future proceeds from the tobacco settlement to do just that. We don't have that money to fall back on now. It's already been spent. We should avoid these accounting gimmicks, get down to real budgeting based upon a consensus of what we really need, and then be honest with ourselves.
Thank you. Carla Nelson.
Well, here's some facts on education that Attorney Moen neglected to say. First, K-12 education is 43% of our state budget. Typically, when there's a huge budget shortfall, like we came into, $6 billion shortfall, our school districts ask us to put more money on the per pupil formula, or at least hold it harmless, and they prefer a one-time shift as to a real cut. So another important thing Ken Moen forgot to mention was that the delayed payments actually went from 90 to 70 under the DFL control prior to me getting there. He actually accused me of voting for those, but I wasn't in office then. So in addition, I didn't really like that shift either, but the fact of the matter is we gave the governor a balanced budget living within our means. He vetoed it the day after session ended, and then he required more money, and his suggestion was to increase the shift to 50-50. That was a $1.4 billion additional shift onto what he did. I would not accept that. However, we did compromise with the governor. We did accept the 60-40 shift because of our priorities and the way we balance the budget. Revenues have come in, and I suspect that by November, that entire shift will be paid off, just like 318's been paid off now. And by the way, we sent the bill to the governor to pay it all off, and he vetoed it.
Okay, we each have one rebuttal left. Should I move to the next question from the floor?
I'm gonna
All right,
respond
Senator Burke.
to that. The veto was due for two reasons, and the governor was very clear on this. He said any tax advantages to be given out have to be given out to various sectors of our population equally. The Republican proposal was almost exclusively to the business community. Secondly, he pointed out, and he said this is a requirement before I'll approve anything. It can't be enhancing the deficit. It's got to be revenue neutral. They didn't propose that to him. That's why the veto occurred.
Thank you. And we'll move to the next question, which will go first to Carla Nelson. Do you believe it is fair for Olmsted to pay $90 million more to state government than it receives back from the state? This is from the floor, so the facts are from the floor.
Yeah, I think probably what that's referring to is that Olmsted County is a net contributor to Minnesota state government. That means we send more money every year up to St. Paul than we get back. And I actually think that figure probably came from our property and records leader. I do recall hearing him talk about that. And the fact of the matter is that my opponent has chastised me for not increasing taxes in Olmsted County so that we could send more money up to St. Paul, fight about it a little bit, and then get about 60 cents on the dollar back here. I don't think that's a good proposal for our folks. And so I believe that we should continue to make sure that we have tax fairness. And right now, Olmsted County contributes way more to the state of Minnesota than it gets back.
Thank you. Ken Moen?
I think the basic factual premise is accurate. That's the figure I've heard about it as well. No, I don't think it's fair. I don't like it either. However, we've shown ourselves totally ineffective in getting bonding funding down here. Why didn't we get the Civic Center proposal? Senator Nelson has said, at least on one occasion, that, well, part of it was because we didn't have a community behind it. No, we had city council, chamber, restaurant, hotel people all behind it. We were just ineffective in making our case up at the legislature. I think I know where the blame falls there. And to clarify the record, I am not advocating just raising taxes in Olmsted County to send more up to the state. What I've said is we have to have revenue on the table as part of the equation, which the Republicans won't even talk about. Revenue's got to be part of the equation. You can't tax your way out of this. You can't just cut your way out of it. There is some midpoint at which we should be working.
Thank you. And seeing no final rebuttal, there's only one left. I'm going to ask one more from the floor. It starts with Ken Moen. How do you plan to work in a bipartisan manner at the legislature?
Well, I think I'd bring 35 years of trial experience to the table. I have been in so many negotiations where at the beginning you think it is absolutely hopeless. And to my amazement, I work in business litigation for the most part. 90 to 95% of those cases settle before you get to a judge or a jury. In the end, people realize that they are best served by finding a common ground and moving on. I really dislike the atmosphere at the legislature right now that indicates if you want it, then I don't. And I've looked at Senator Nelson's record, and I must say, on issues that people already agree on, she is very willing to cooperate. However, on partisan issues, she is strictly partisan. I have not seen one vote of hers in which she's taken on her own party where the vote meant anything. I would be a state senator who would actually look for common ground.
Thank you. Carla Nelson.
What was the question again, please?
This is from the floor. How do you plan to work in a bipartisan manner at the legislature?
That is the key thing. and I have a record of doing so. 21 of the bills that I chief authored were passed bipartisanly and signed by the governor. And Ken, they took a lot of work. People did not agree right away. People seldom do. You need to listen to all sides. In addition, it is simply untrue to say that I've not stood against my party. It's a documented fact. I encourage you to go back and look at your Post bulletins. Look at the front page of the Post bulletin when it came to the health bill. I was the only Republican in the entire legislature that voted against it. Why was that? Because it was bad for our district. There was a proposal in there that would have cost our area millions of dollars. That was wrong. I had no problem standing up to my party and voting against that. My job is to represent this district. And in addition, it's been well recorded in the press that Senator Nelson sponsored legislation that was not even thought about in her caucus, because I thought it was important, and it was important for this district. I will continue to stand for this district.
Thank you. And we now move to the closing arguments. And speaking first, with 1 minute, is Ken Moen.
Thank you. There are distinct differences between us. I think you've heard that. She pretends to be a champion of education, yet she was one who voted for the additional shift. She's explained that that was some kind of a compromise. I didn't see her really fighting about that, and it doesn't seem to be unacceptable to her to balance the state short-term budget on the backs of our kids. We need to work harder at strengthening, providing that once you fund education, it stays there. Her agenda, she says, is to create jobs. Yet the only idea I really see is a trickle-down idea of leaving more money in the pockets of the very wealthy. It hasn't worked. We need more specific programs that are really rewarding the actual creation of jobs. That's all.
Thank you. Carla Nelson, closing statement.
Well, thank you for being here tonight. We indeed have heard very different visions. One of pointing out problems and one of solving problems. I'm a problem solver. That's my record. Here's what others have said about me. The Minnesota School Boards called me a superhero of education. The National Federation of Independent Business gave me the Guardian of Small Business Award. I was named a legislator of distinction for local control by the League of Minnesota Cities. I was named legislator of distinction for economic development by the Coalition of Minnesota Cities. Legislator of the Year by the American Heart Association and the Stroke Association. Champion of Racial Justice by the OAP. Other endorsements include MedPAC. That's very important for our district. Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association, Minnesota Professional Firefighters, Minnesota Farm Bureau, Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, North Central States Regional Council of Carpenters, Rochester Post Bulletin. Others I don't have time to tell you tonight, but I'll be glad to visit with you about them. Now I'm asking for your endorsement on November 6th to continue to work for you to make Minnesota a more job-friendly state. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Thank you, everyone. Let's give them a round of applause.